Hey, such a great opportunity for us to come and gather together. Thank you so much for being here. Those that are present in this building, those of you that are present online, we are all present together. Hey, everybody here in this room, we want to give a big shout out for all those that are watching out there. Tell everybody how much you appreciate it. Woo! Oh, now, come on now. Give it up. There we go. A little bit louder. There we go. That's right. God is going to deliver us here and there and everywhere. But today we want to talk very specifically as we dive into a brand new series called Living, Loving, Passing, Walking Through the Sea. Everybody say through the sea. How do you live and love and pass and walk when you're going through the sea? So this had never been done before in this biblical account. It has never been done since, but the lessons that we learn are applications that we can apply to our lives right now during these times of political turmoil, of racial turmoil, of authoritarian turmoil or authority turmoil, of school turmoil. Man, that's all shook up everybody, isn't it? Of work turmoil. How am I going to work and my kids go to school only half the week if I'm in a public school? How am I going to do that? How am I going to do what it is that I'm supposed to do? How am I going to keep providing if the benefits run out? Well, let me just share something with you. There is a God who has seen it from before the foundation of the world. He knows how many cells are in your body. He knows who it is that he is making you to be, and he will bring you and me deliverance. Do you believe that today? So the first thing I want to share with you today is just this thought as we begin this message. How do you live between a rock and a hard place? How do you live between a rock and a hard place? You know what that's like. It's time for the bills to become due, and the bills are higher than the amount of money you got to pay out of this stack. So you decide, I'm going to pay this one this week, and then that one next week, and then maybe the next one the next week, and I'm going to let that one slide. You know what it's like to be between a rock and a hard place. You know what it's like to be between a rock and a hard place when you kind of like this guy, but you kind of like that guy, and you can't really make up your mind about which one's the best, and you're kind of enjoying the tension of both of them. That's between a rock and a hard place, and you painted yourself into that corner. How many of you have found yourself in a situation where you've got one job opportunity and then another job opportunity, and this one pays a little bit more than this one, but they're saying you got to start this one today in order to get paid, so you have to decide, am I going to do this one or am I going to wait and do that one? If you're like me, you go, I'm going to do this one until they offer that one, then I'm going to do that one, right? How do you live between a rock and a hard place? Here's the story. God's people have been held in captivity for 430 years in Egypt. Now, it's been 4, 5, 6 months since this Corona stuff has started in earnest, and you kind of feel like, man, I feel like I've been in prison for decades and this kind of thing because it seems like it has lasted so long. And we're always waiting for the next normal. And when normal goes back to the way it's always been. Well, here's the deal, y'all. We have to adjust as we move into the future. We have to leave behind the past way of doing things as we head toward God's promised land for us individually and for us collectively as his people. So how do we do that? You know the story. There are plagues. Moses comes. He says, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, no. And so there's this whole back and forth between them with frogs and blood in the water and locusts and all kinds of crazy plagues. And so ultimately, Pharaoh says, y'all leave and get out of Egypt. Today, I want to invite you to get up out of Egypt, out of the Egypt of your favorite television news channel, out of the Egypt of the person that you think is going to save you. Nobody is going to save you except the one true God who came to save the world. And today, we're going to talk about God delivering them then, us now, and others in the future. Let me tell you something. Your children and your grandchildren and your great-great-grandchildren are going to be able to learn from what you learned in this process. But you say there's so many obstacles. There's time obstacles. There's work obstacles. There's Zoom obstacles. There's go-to-meeting obstacles. There's financial obstacles. I've been reading a book by Ryan Holiday called The Obstacle is the Way. The obstacle is the way. When you play football, you don't somebody just hand a football to somebody and one team goes another, and the other team goes another. Okay, y'all go ahead, score. No, there's an obstacle. There's competition. There is a battle for your heart and your soul and your mind that only God can win with you, in you, if you have him as your source of deliverance. Here's the first thing I want to share with you today, very specifically. Paint yourself into God's corner. paint yourself into God's corner, in a place that's inescapable without him. That doesn't mean to go out and spend more money than you have and say, dear God, please deliver me. It doesn't mean to go make foolish choices about relational decisions. It doesn't mean going to make foolish choices about parental decisions. But if you're kind of like most people today, you feel like you're between a rock and a hard place and that you're painted into a corner. Regular routines aren't working. Regular school routines aren't working. Regular work routines aren't working. Regular anything doesn't seem to be working. It does still feel weird to me. By the way, I've got mine in my back pocket. It's right here. And I promise not to spit on anybody in the front row or anything like that. To walk in the store and go, oh gosh, I forgot my mask. Got to go back to my car and get my mask because I want to be a good citizen, right? It's weird to be in that kind of world in which we live. However, this can be our finest hour if we understand that God is the one to deliver us. How do we do that? Let me begin by sharing this scripture with you. So God's people have escaped Egypt. And then Pharaoh freaks out because he knows he's lost his labor force. So he takes off after them with dozens and dozens of chariots and hundreds, perhaps thousands of men, both in front and in behind, waiting in arrears to come help them out from behind. And they start charging after them. And God sends them on this weird pathway. He doesn't send them on the most direct route. He makes them kind of go around their thumb to get to their forefinger. He makes them go in a strange direction, and they're caught in a place that they can't get out of. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and camp near Pi-hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. Now, it's easy to blow past those things, but those names have meanings. Pi-hahiroth was a place that meant mouth of the gorges. They were in a place where they were close to a gorge and they couldn't get out. Then Migdol is called between a strong tower. Then he says they are to camp by the sea directly opposite Baal-zephon. Everybody say Baal-zephon. Baal-zephon was a Canaanite god or a god of the ancient Egyptian world in which the storms went through. So he says, camp yourself between the mouth of the gorge where you can fall in, a strong tower that's got you hemmed in, and Baal-zephon, the god of the storm. He's placing them right in the middle of a place that they can't get out of. He said, Pharaoh will think, the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his armies. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did this. They're like in the third or fourth stop after they're leaving Egypt. And so they went in obedience to the next place. And Moses is leading them. Now, by this time, you got to understand, you know how leadership is. Can you imagine how CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and NBR would be talking about Moses' leadership? He obviously doesn't know the right way to go. He's not going the clearest, fastest way. They obviously don't know he doesn't follow the right kind of GPS. He doesn't have the right kind of, sometimes you need to turn off the news channels and tune into God's channel. The second thing I want you to see today is we need to understand that God may put you between a rock and a hard place so that you will learn absolute dependence on him. Not the check that's going to come in the mail, not the job offer that's going to come out of nowhere, instead so that you learn to depend upon him for everything that you need, everything that you want, everything that you need to do, how you manage your schedule, how you take care of your children, how you take care of your priorities, who you interact with, who you don't interact with, how you relate to one another. You say, but please give me some relief for this time, Pastor Ray. Please show me how in this hard place in which I live, how am I supposed to live? Listen, the Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon. Here's the thing I want you to see here as we move through this message, is that they obeyed God and they went where he told them to go, even though it seemed irrational. There are some of you who have obeyed God and chosen to continue to contribute financially to organizations like ours, even though it didn't make sense for you financially because there's some uncertainty financially in your life. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. The last 2 weeks, thousands of people, have snaked through our parking lot, waiting in line to get food, 100,000 pounds of food thus far that God provided that we didn't know was going to be provided a month ago. And you help make it possible. Now, it's not free, but it is relatively cheap, and it is fresh. We got a thing on the web yesterday. This lady said, thank you so much for this food. My family would not eat without this food that y'all providing each week. So thank you, church, for doing that. But that's what they did. What we have to do is to obey. Here's another one. How many of you right now are kind of feeling like people are not taking care of you? That you're not feeling loved enough? Now, be careful if you're sitting next to your spouse, because that might be kind of awkward. If you're out there and you're a student, you're kind of feeling like nobody understands me, everybody hates me, I think I'm going to eat some worms. I'm not going to really have to go to school with my mom 2 days a week or my dad. There is one phrase that can change your life in the way that you interact with one another if you'll put it into action. This has to do with your heart and your motive and what you're feeling and what you're doing and how you're going to be outwardly directed. Here is the question. What does love require me to do right now? What does love require me to do? This is not in your notes, but I want you to say this with me out loud. What does love require me to do? With my kid that's acting up, with my spouse who just doesn't seem to know what I need, what does love require me to do for them? And here's the other part of that. If you have that as your core motivation right now, if you have that as something that's deep down inside of you, and you really do want to love those that are closest to you, you really do want to work with your teams at work, you really do want to do things in this community to make a difference in this community, in this world. If you're really willing to say, again, what is it? Say it with me out loud. What does love require me? Very good. You guys are listening. Thank you guys. I heard y'all online. That was awesome. Good job. So here's the next question to ask. If you love the people that are closest to you, what if each day you said, how can I help you today? How can I be of service to you today? As a matter of fact, some of you are going, that's right. If my husband ever did that, I would. Or if my wife ever paid attention to me, I would do that. Or if my boss ever cared. So no, it's not kind of like when they're going to do it. Are you going to do it? So let's practice right now. Let's say, what can I do to help? Say, very good. Say it again. What can I do to help? All right, now turn to the people that are closest to you. Now, if you're here alone, that kind of stuff, you can just turn to somebody and just practice with somebody. It's kind of weird because you're here alone, that kind of stuff. But you can go back home with your spouse or your children, whatever. But turn to the people that you came with and say, what can I do to help you today? No, some of y'all are just kind of passing by this assignment. Some of you acting like this is not for you. I want us to practice. What can I do to help? Now the other person needs to reciprocate. What can I do to help? That question and your response to it will make any difficult decision bearable. Because I know I've got somebody in my corner. What does love require of me? Love requires of me that I help in some way. Now, here's the deal. Here's the hard thing about this question. These people are over there kind of going, okay, what now? We're here between Baal Zephon, the storm god, and the tower that's got us pinned in at the mouth of the gorges. And here come the freaking Egyptians, and they're here to wipe us out. There's something about that phrase, what does love require of me? And then what can I do to help? Now, here's the thing about that phrase. Those of you that tend to be loving and tend to be kind and tend to be thoughtful, you're going to tend to want to do this all the time. And the other person, the Ray Hardee corollary of marriage, by the way, is this: opposites attract and then they repel. So the other person who's used to taking is going to need to say, what can I do to help you today? It will transform your marriage in the midst of this rock and hard place. It will transform your business. It will transform your team. Instead of, well, somebody should have fixed this computer glitch, or somebody should have paid that freaking bill, or somebody needs to manage cash around here better so I can be making a good living. Instead of, what if you showed up to work tomorrow? You got up tomorrow morning, you got down on your knees before your spouse and said, what can I do to help? Now, some of you are saying you're pushing it. What if you got down at work and you walked in the door and say, hey, listen, you know what, guys? I heard about love yesterday. What can I do to help? Well, you can bring me a cup of coffee with 2 creams and sugars. Absolutely. It's coming right up. Can I help you with that? Hey, listen, I've got this computer issue. Is there any possibility today you could help me out with it to fix this glitch and go through this process? Would you mind helping me? Guess what? I would be willing to bet that people are going to be much more willing to help if you have this attitude. Here's why. Because love is what it's all about. What does love require of me? Well, here's what these people had determined. These people had determined if they loved their God with all their heart and soul and mind and strength, they were going to follow God's leader during that time, even though he was taking them on what seemed like a wild goose chase. And in the meantime, we're going to trust him, we're going to love him, and then we're going to love those around them. My family, my children, my friends, my posse, my entourage. And here's the third thing. You're going to love this one. I promise you're just going to love this. Say, I'm going to love this. Cry out to God with exactly what you're feeling. Cry out to God with exactly what you're feeling. Sometimes when we approach to God, we think that we're always supposed to do it in the holy kind of way. And when you should, you understand who God is. He is our Heavenly Father, and instruct him as our Heavenly Father. Remember Jesus said when he taught us how to pray, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You can start out that way. Here's how I start out my prayer sometimes. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. But it's hurting. Are you trying to kill me? Is something wrong here? Have you gone on vacation and forgot to come back home? Some of you are going like, man, I'm not supposed to talk to God like that. They did. And examples are replete through all the Bible of people going like, my wife just doesn't understand me. My husband doesn't get it. My kids just won't listen. I don't know whether to take this job. I can't figure out how to make my finances work. Dear God, please help. Yesterday, I was in a hurry, and I was in a hurry to do something very, very important. My mother-in-law had the 40th anniversary of her 40th birthday yesterday. She's already told the whole world last night. She said she still loves me. She was 80. So we're on the way to run some errands. And I run into a train. Why is a train coming in front of me? Well, I'm running my errands. I'm trying to get food for the masses, my family. I'm trying to take care of this and make this a wonderful incident. All of a sudden, here's a train coming through. And by the way, when the train was coming through, it was in no hurry. Like 11 miles an hour, 12 miles an hour, 13 miles an hour, back to 10 miles an hour, 9 miles an hour. And I'm sitting here going, oh, dear Lord, have mercy. I've got a list, and I've got somebody who's waiting for me to help them, and food is dependent upon me, and dear God, please help. And I looked up and the train was gone. You go, yeah, well, that was just luck. No, it wasn't. God delivered me because I was on a love mission. Cry out to God with exactly what you're feeling. Dear God, my boss has put too much trouble on me, too much stuff for me to do. Dear God, how can I get that teammate to work with me who's jealous of me? Dear God, how can I get my kid to listen? Dear God, how can I make it through trying to figure out what I'm going to do next? Hey, ladies and gentlemen, over the next month or month and a half, we're going to walk through the sea together, and God's going to give us some principles, but the obstacle is the way. It's the way the Waymaker wants to take us. Listen to this. This is some of the most powerful words in Scripture to people who are afraid to tell God what it is they want to tell him. As Pharaoh approached, now when Pharaoh approached, it wasn't like he was kind of walking up. He was on this big, honking, huge chariot. He was surrounded by other chariots. He was surrounded by people that were raising a lot of dust, and they were after them. They could see his dust coming before they could hear him coming. You ever felt like that? The payment's due. You got to make the sale or otherwise you don't get to keep the job. You're on this financial cliff. You're in this relational thing where it's kind of like either it's going to go really, really good from here, or it's going to go really, really bad from here. God, please help us. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. I love that phrase. You know something? One of the things that's happened in this crisis is that we become terrorized by information. We've been paralyzed by information. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. I think during the series, I might even preach a message about how to read and watch the news of today. Because you got to make sure to watch the news and look for facts. Because those on this side are going to spin things to make things look on this side. And these people want a certain group and persons to be elected. Then you got people on this side, and then they're going to spin the news this way. You go back and you look at the facts, and it takes time. You can't get the facts on Twitter at the stoplight. You got to stop and say, I'm going to look at the facts. And what do the facts tell me? Here's the other thing. I'm going to look for facts that are not convenient for me to know. Things that may not be convenient to my side. I want to know the truth. I want to grab it by its ears, look at it in its face that may be ugly or may be good or maybe somewhere in between and say, I want to know the facts, not just somebody's opinion. And who can scream the loudest? They were terrified. Do you know why you're terrified? This came to me sitting out in the lobby a couple weeks ago. Because we're paralyzed by information. Wear the mask, don't wear the mask. Wear this kind of mask, don't wear that kind of mask. Go to school, kids don't get it. Well, kids could go back home and give it to grandma. Are you with me? And so you kind of feel like you're walking here, then you try to take a step in that direction, you try to take a step in that direction, and then in that direction, and you're kind of hemmed in. And if you're like me, you kind of want to go, you want to go Incredible Hulk on stuff, right? Don't. I'm busy enough already. I don't need to come bail you out of jail. They were terrified, and say this phrase with me, and cried out to the Lord. And cried out to the Lord. God does not mind when you cry out to him. God does not mind when you cry out against him. There's a whole book in the Bible that everybody ought to read at least one time in their life. I don't recommend you read it when you're depressed. It's the book of Job. There's not a whole lot of good news in it till the end. They cried and they accused, and certainly like these people were doing. Why did you put us here? They said to Moses, here's what happens. When situations get bad, we attack the leader. That's happening everywhere in our society. In politics, in business, in churches, in communities. I want to tell you what, I've had people attack me because we have services and the building is open. I'm sorry, I have to pastor everybody, not just those that are waiting. Although we respect that you were waiting. There were people when the Red Sea, by the way, I'm going to give away part of the story next week, the Red Sea parts. We're going to get to that next week, but right now we're just talking about what we do while we're getting ready for that. There's some of you that are, these are green light people. They're kind of like, yeah, I'm here. That's cool. They got the masks on and stuff like that. And they're sitting socially distanced from one another for the most part. Some of y'all need to spread out next week. But anyway. And then there are those of you going like, ain't coming. Watch online. Praise the Lord. Thank you so much. We're glad you're still watching. That's awesome. You're red light people. These green light people, y'all red light people. You are not going to come back to church until Anthony Fauci rips off his mask and gives Deborah Burks a kiss on her lips. You're not coming back. I understand that because the vaccine has worked and everybody's happy. And the rest of the world is kind of in yellow. Kind of like they're cautious, and some of you have come today for the first time today. Listen, here's what I want you to hear very clearly. There were people like that back then too, and it's okay. And I'm going to pastor all of you, whether you're at a distance or up close or you're cautious or whatever. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? what have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians. You know what this means? It means that they're saying we prefer slavery. We prefer living in constant dominion with somebody else having chains on us just because we're going to get fed and just because we're going to get what we've always had. Really? Is that really the way we're going to live? It's interesting that Moses doesn't freak out. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians and to die in the desert. I got 4 things to say to you when we're taxiing for a landing. First of all, fear not. Day by day. Stand firm. Day by day. See deliverance day by day. Be still day by day. Stand daily. Fear not daily. You know there's 366 fear nots in the Bible. That means there's one for every day of the year plus one for leap year. When you need the extra day. Stand, fear not. Listen, Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. That's what I'm going to say to you guys. Do not be afraid. Take all the precautions. Remember the core motivation. What does love require me to do? Ask the people around you, what can I do to help? Because guess what? Today's a new day. 2 or 3 weeks from now, it might be a totally different kind of thing. We just have to pay attention day by day. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians, get this, the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. Next week, I'm going to show you a picture of where those Egyptians ended up, if I can find it. I've found it years ago. I'm going to go back and find it again. There's evidence that they're laying at the bottom of the sea. And here's the phrase. Some of you need to memorize this. Some of you need to create little emojis you put on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. This is your phrase. The Lord himself will fight for you. You need only to be still. Say this with me. The Lord himself will fight for you. You need only to stand still. And socially distanced away from one another so that we can't spread any germs, but turning to face the person beside you that you came with. Turn and say, the Lord himself will fight for you. You need only to stand still. All right, now, if you're with somebody you love and you promise, you can squeeze them by the hand. If you are not, don't be weird and do that. In a time of turmoil in my life, and ladies and gentlemen, let me share with you that I've had them. I've had seasons. I've had seasons even where I was crippled and handicapped by depression. In my junior year in college, when I should have been on the top of the world, I was depressed every day. I saw a counselor at least once a week, if not twice. And then God led me to make a move from the college I was attending in a strange kind of way after my third year before what was to be my senior year, which made no sense whatsoever from a logical standpoint. Even my spiritual parents were going, what? Well, okay. God wants you to. Okay. This verse came into my life, and I've never forgotten it. He says, God, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Among the nations, in the earth. I will be exalted. Be still and know that I'm God. So the bottom line today is very simply this: be still. God wins. Follow him. And I'm going to beg of you, all of those of you that are watching here or electronically, digitally from a distance, and I beg you to pray for me. Pray for our staff as we lead and make decisions, because we want to put everybody's health as a preeminent priority. But not just physical health, spiritual health too, and emotional health, and relational health, and mental health. Paul said this, and I've never said this before in the pulpit, so I especially ask for those of you that are praying people right now, would you please pray for me right now, this specific prayer? I'll follow him as he follows Christ. Here's what I want to ask you. Follow me as I follow Christ. Follow me as I follow Christ. Be still. God wins. Follow him. And pray, pray, pray that I will lead you well as we walk through the sea together. I want to invite you to pray with me. And I want to ask you to make a decision to paint yourself into God's corner. There are people that are listening, people that are watching from a distance. There is a way and a truth in the life. He is the one true light of the world. He is the good shepherd who laid down his life for his sheep, those he loves. He loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son, so that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn it, but to save the world through him. I want to invite you to accept Jesus Christ today. In the room, like the young man did in last week's service, there are lots of people who've kind of been uncertain, and you kind of been keeping your options open. Maybe there's a little bit of truth here and a little bit of truth there. But today, if you have heard God's voice, I'm going to challenge you to paint yourself into God's corner and saying, I belong to Jesus and nobody else. And today I want to make certain. And today I want to invite you to pray this prayer with me. A very simple prayer. Dear Jesus, I give you my life. I turn from my old life. Dear Jesus, I give you my life. One more time. Dear Jesus, I give you my life. I turn from my old life. I give you my life. I'm following you now.